Let me ask you something real quick. When you hear the phrase a woman living alone without a man, what comes to mind? Be honest. Society's got a habit of painting that woman as lonely, broken, or waiting for someone to rescue her. But here's the truth, and it might rattle some cages. That woman, she's not missing anything. She's building something. Today, we're stripping away the stereotypes and getting real about what it actually means for a woman to live life on her own terms without apology, without permission, and without a man. Let's talk about something we often get wrong. This idea that if a woman lives alone, she must be lonely. That's the story we've been sold for generations, right? A woman sitting by the window, sipping wine, maybe scrolling through her phone with a sad expression, just waiting for someone to fill the silence. But let me tell you something that needs to be said louder and more often. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. And for a lot of women, living alone is not some tragic last resort situation. It's intentional. It's powerful. It's peace. We live in a world that's built on assumptions. We assume if a woman isn't married by a certain age, something went wrong. We assume that quiet equals emptiness. We assume that independence is something a woman settles for, not something she chooses. But when you actually talk to women who live alone, not the way movies portray them, not the way society talks about them, you start to hear a very different story. You hear about mornings with no rush, no compromise. You hear about evenings where they don't need to justify their peace to anyone. You hear about freedom. You hear about clarity. You hear about women who have learned to enjoy their own company and who aren't in a hurry to trade that in. See, we're conditioned to believe that partnership is the destination, that every step we take, school, job, house, is all leading up to someone else arriving in the picture to make it all worthwhile. But what if the destination was just you? What if arriving at a place where you're content on your own isn't a sign you've missed something, but a sign you've arrived exactly where you need to be? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to bash relationships. Love is beautiful. Partnership can be a blessing. But it's not the only path to a full life, and it's not a requirement for joy. Some women choose solitude because they value their space, because they've built routines that make them feel centered, because they've done the work to understand what they want, and they're not willing to water it down just to meet an expectation. You know what? It takes strength. Waking up every day and choosing your own voice over the noise of what others think you are should be doing. It takes strength to sit at a dinner table by yourself and feel full, not just from the food, but from the freedom to just be. No pretending, no managing someone else's emotions, just stillness, just presence. And sure, there might be quiet moments. There might be holidays or Sunday afternoons that feel different, but different doesn't mean empty. In fact, that silence can be sacred. It's where you learn what your own laughter sounds like when no one's watching. It's where you figure out what you love. Not because someone else introduced you to it, but because you found it on your own. That kind of self-knowledge, that's not loneliness, that's power. Too often, we confuse dependence with connection. We assume that needing someone is the same as loving someone, but real connection, real love has to start from a place of wholeness, and you can't get there if you're afraid of your own company. That's what so many women who live alone have figured out. They've done the brave thing. They've stopped running from the quiet. They've embraced it. And in that quiet, they've found themselves not as someone waiting to be rescued, but as someone worth knowing, worth respecting, and absolutely worth celebrating. So the next time you see a woman living alone, don't see a gap waiting to be filled. See a life being lived on her own terms, in her own rhythm, with her own definition of what it means to be whole. That's not loneliness. That's liberation. You know what's wild? The way we treat freedom like it's a consolation prize, like if a woman ends up free, it must mean she couldn't get what she's really wanted. As if independence is something you settle for when love doesn't work out. But let's clear that up right now. Freedom is not failure. It's not a backup plan. It's not what you choose when life goes off track. Sometimes freedom heirs is the track. We don't say that enough. We don't celebrate it enough because too often we've been taught to view a woman's worth through her proximity to a man. Is she married? Is she dating? Is someone pursuing her? As if her entire value is tied up in being chosen. But what if she chose herself? What if she said no to the timeline, no to the pressure, and yes to her own peace? That's not failure. That's what's courage. See, choosing freedom in a world that tells you you're supposed to be partnered by now, that's bold. And I mean real freedom. The kind where a woman decides she's not going to shape her life around someone else's idea of what it should look like, where she stops waiting for a relationship to validate her journey and instead decides she's already whole, already valuable, already living. Now, that kind of freedom gets misunderstood. People look at a woman who lives alone, travels alone, builds alone, and they assume she must have been hurt, that maybe she gave up on love. But most of the time, she didn't give up on love. She just gave up on settling. There's a difference, and it's a big one. She's not avoiding commitment. She's just refusing to shrink herself to fit into something that doesn't align with who she is becoming. And let's be real. Freedom isn't always easy. It requires sacrifice. It requires facing uncomfortable truths. It means being willing to walk away from comfort in order to protect your peace. Sometimes it means saying no to someone who checks a few boxes, but still isn't right, and that can be hard. That can be lonely. But it's not failure. It's strength. It's maturity. It's a woman understanding that her life isn't a resume for someone else to approve. It's a masterpiece she's painting for herself. People love to say she's too picky, but no one calls a man picky when he protects his standards. No one questions him when he says he's not ready to settle down. But a woman, oh, she must be damaged. She must have a wall up. She must be bitter. No, she's clear. She knows what she brings to the table. And she's not afraid to eat alone until the right person pulls up a chair with the same level of presence, respect, and peace she brings to her own life. You know what's really powerful? A woman who doesn't need permission to take up space. A woman who doesn't wait for someone to come home in order to feel at home in her own skin. A woman who isn't measuring her joy by someone else's affection. That's a woman who's free. And not because she had no other choice, but because she made a choice. There's this unspoken belief that a woman's independence is a sign that something's missing, that she must be keeping the door cracked just in case someone finally shows up to save her from her singleness. But the truth, she's not waiting at the door. She's out living. She's investing in herself. She's showing up fully in her work, her passions, her friendships. And if love comes, beautiful. But if it doesn't, she's still good. Better than good. Because freedom isn't a lack, it's an overflow. It's what happens when you stop handing out pieces of yourself just to be seen. It's what happens when you realize that your life doesn't need to be framed by someone else's timeline or their comfort or their expectations. Freedom is not failure. It's not a detour. It's a destination that some women arrive at with open eyes, open hands, and zero apologies. And that right there is something worth respecting. Let's break down a common misconception. This idea that when a woman lives alone, she's somehow just trying to compensate, like she's filling in the gaps left by not having a man around. People look at her and think, well, she had to become self-reliant because there was no one else to step up. But what if we flip that narrative? What if she's not compensating for anything? What if she's just as capable? There's this unspoken tone in how people talk about independent women. She does everything herself. They say, with this undertone of either pity or surprise, as if she didn't have a choice. But what they're missing, what so many people miss, is that she's not playing both roles. She's just playing hers, and she's doing it well. She's not stepping into a man's shoes. She's walking strong in her own. You see, being self-reliant isn't about pretending you don't need anyone. It's not about building walls or avoiding connection. It's about building a foundation. A woman who can take care of her space, her finances, her decisions. She's not trying to be everything. She's just being enough, and not enough by someone else's definition, enough by her own. That's not a replacement for partnership. That's a life rooted in agency. Too often we treat a woman's independence like it's a temporary fix, like she's just doing what she has to do until someone else comes along. But some women aren't filling in for a man. They're fulfilling their own purpose. And that doesn't mean they wouldn't welcome love or companionship or support. It just means those things aren't required for her life to function or for her joy to feel full. There's a difference between wanting partnership and needing it to feel whole. And women who live alone, who thrive on their own, they know the difference deeply. People like to say, she's doing it all by herself. And while that might sound admirable on the surface, there's often a whisper behind it that says, but she's not supposed to, as if a woman's strength is only admirable when it's temporary, when it's leading her back to someone. But what if strength isn't a season? What if it's a way of life, not a burden, a rhythm, not survival? A self-reliant woman makes decisions without waiting for a co-signer. She trusts her own voice. She learns from her own mistakes. She navigates the ups and downs of life, knowing that while partnership can be beautiful, she doesn't need it to anchor her. Her anchor is already deep in the ground. That doesn't make her hard. It makes her honest, doesn't make her cold. It makes her clear. Let me say this too. Self-reliance doesn't mean she doesn't struggle. It doesn't mean she has everything figured out. But what it does mean is that when things get hard, she doesn't crumble. She adjusts. She gets up. She finds a way. That kind of resilience doesn't come from trying to be a man. It comes from knowing her own strength, from building trust with herself. And that trust, it changes everything. There's something really grounding about watching a woman move through the world with calm confidence, not arrogant, not defensive, just centered. She knows what she brings to the table, and she knows how to build that table if she has to. She's not performing strength. She is strength. She's not replacing someone. She's embracing herself. And here's the thing most people don't see. When a woman is self-reliant, she's not closing the door on partnership. She's just not building her life around the hope that someone might show up. That's a different kind of freedom, a different kind of power. She's not just surviving on her own. She's thriving on her own. And if someone does come into her life, they're not saving her from anything. They're joining her in something that's already alive, already whole, already real, because self-reliance isn't a substitute. It's a standard. Let's go ahead and talk about the myth. And it is a myth that a woman is somehow incomplete without a man, that unless there's a relationship in the picture, something must be off. That deep down, no matter how successful or joyful or full her life seems, it's all just waiting to be finished by the presence of a partner. Now, think about how often that message gets pushed. Movies, books, family gatherings, even the casual questions people ask, are you seeing anyone yet? Like her story doesn't count unless there's someone standing next to her. But here's the truth. A woman is not a half waiting to be made whole. She is not unfinished. She is not lacking. She is not broken. The presence of a man doesn't suddenly complete her life the way the last piece of a puzzle snaps into place, because she was never a puzzle with missing pieces to begin with. This idea that a woman needs someone else to be complete has done real damage. It's made people rush into things they weren't ready for. It's made women second guess themselves when they felt perfectly fine before everyone else told them they should feel otherwise. It's led many to measure their worth through someone else's interest, as if value only shows up when someone else recognizes it. That's backwards. That's small thinking. That's not truth. Completion is not something another person brings. It's something that comes from within. And that doesn't mean a woman can't want love. Of course she can. She can want closeness, intimacy, companionship, all of it. But it should be something that adds to her life, not something she's using to fix it. The healthiest relationships aren't built from two people trying to fill each other's voids. They're built from two people who already know who they are and choose to walk together because they want to, not because they have to. And that's what so many women living alone have figured out. They've taken the time to know themselves, the good, the messy, the brilliant, the growing. They've faced silence. They've faced solitude. They've come through seasons that tested them, and they did it without someone else propping them up. That kind of experience teaches you something deep. It teaches you that your value isn't tied to how someone else sees you. It's tied to how you see yourself. There's a kind of pressure, especially on women, to always be preparing themselves for someone else, whether it's physically, emotionally, even spiritually, to always be in this quiet state of readiness, as if life doesn't really begin until someone shows up to affirm it. But living for that moment robs you of the ones you already have. It makes you miss the beauty of now. And that beauty is real, whether or not someone else is there to notice it. A woman doesn't need someone to validate her joy. She can walk through her day fully present, fully grounded, and fully alive on her own terms. Her victories matter even when they're witnessed by no one. Her pain matters even when she carries it alone. Her growth counts even if there's no one clapping for it. She is whole because she's chosen to honor who she is, not who someone else wants her to be. And what's even more powerful, when a woman knows she's whole on her own, she becomes very intentional about who she lets in, because she's not looking to be completed. She's looking to be respected. She's not searching for someone to rescue her. She's watching for someone who understands how rare it is to meet someone who's already done the work. So the next time someone wonders why a woman is still single or assumes something must be missing, maybe we flip that question around. Maybe what's really happening is that she's not missing anything. Maybe she's just full of clarity, peace, purpose. And she's not willing to trade that for someone who doesn't match her pace, her peace, or her power. Because she is not a half. She is a whole, standing strong, standing clear, and standing on her own. Let's talk about something that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. What actually happens when a woman lives alone and embraces solitude? I'm not just talking about the logistics of having your own place, your own space, your own schedule. I'm talking about what starts to shift inside. The kind of growth that happens when you're not constantly adjusting yourself around someone else's expectations. The clarity that comes when the noise quiets down and all that's left is just you in your full, unfiltered self. See, solitude has a bad reputation. People tend to think of it like isolation. Like if you're spending too much time by yourself, something must be wrong. You must be avoiding something or missing someone. But that's a shallow view. Real solitude, chosen solitude, is a completely different experience. It's not about escaping people. It's about returning to yourself. When a woman lives alone, she gets to hear herself think. She gets to discover what she actually likes, not what she's been conditioned to enjoy or what's been convenient in a relationship. She figures out what kind of music she wants to wake up to, what kind of food she wants to eat, not cook for someone else, not split the bill on, but truly enjoy. She learns how her energy flows throughout the day. When she needs rest, when she feels most alive, when she's most creative, that kind of knowing that only comes from space to reflect, space to explore, space to just be without having to perform. There's something incredibly powerful about that, because once you know yourself, you stop looking outward to define yourself. You don't feel the same pressure to impress. You don't bend as easily. And not because you're hardened, but because you're rooted. And that rootedness is something that can only come when you've had the quiet moments to build it, moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day. And growth isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it looks like crying in your own kitchen at midnight because something triggered an old wound. Sometimes it looks like sitting in the stillness, feeling everything you used to distract yourself from. But here's the thing, when there's no one else around to carry the weight of your emotions, you realize how capable you are of holding space for yourself. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious of your patterns, conscious of your needs, conscious of how much healing you've already done and how much more you're willing to do. Living alone doesn't mean you shut people out. In fact, it can make your relationships richer because you're not connecting out of fear or dependency. You're connecting from a place of overflow, not emptiness. You start to recognize which people honor your growth and which ones pull you back into old versions of yourself. That awareness, that comes from time spent in your own company. And this is the part people overlook, the creativity, the joy, the freedom that comes when no one else is editing your day. You want to rearrange your furniture at 2 a.m. Do it. You want to spend 3 hours reading in silence without having to explain yourself. Go for it. You want to dream out loud, try something new, change directions completely. You can. No judgment, no compromise, just movement, just growth. This isn't about avoiding relationships. It's not about building a fortress. It's about building a foundation, a place where you can return to center anytime you need it. And for women who live alone, that foundation is reinforced every day with every small decision, every boundary kept, every moment honored. Growth becomes a lifestyle, not a phase. And the deeper that growth goes, the more beautiful and honest life becomes. Because when you've had the courage to sit with yourself long enough, you realize that your own presence is not just enough. It's zero essential. Let's be honest. The world still has a lot to say about women who live alone. People talk. They make assumptions. They ask those loaded questions, sometimes with a smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. Don't you ever get lonely? You haven't met anyone yet. Aren't you afraid of growing old alone? All these questions wrapped in concern, but often laced with judgment. And the thing is, they don't ask because they care about your peace. They ask because your peace makes them uncomfortable. See, when a woman lives alone and does it well, with confidence, clarity, and no apology, it shakes something in people, especially when she doesn't seem to be in a rush to change it, because we live in a culture that expects women to always be striving toward a relationship, like it's the gold standard of happiness, the measure of a meaningful life. So when a woman steps outside that script and says, actually, I'm good, people don't know what to do with that. They start looking for the cracks. They assume something must be wrong, but sometimes the only thing that's wrong is that she stopped living for their approval. Let's get this straight. A woman who lives alone isn't missing out. She's just choosing differently. And that choice deserves respect, not suspicion, because living alone doesn't mean she's disconnected. She may be deeply rooted in friendships, community, creativity, purpose. Her life might be full of meaning that has nothing to do with romance. But society tends to miss that because people are still looking at her through an outdated lens. They think if she's not attached to someone, she must be adrift. But really, she might be more grounded than most. There's this idea that women who don't follow the traditional path are somehow rebelling, like they're being defiant for the sake of it. But a lot of the time, they're not pushing back. They're just walking forward into a life that makes sense for them. And that walk takes guts, because choosing to live on your own terms means accepting that not everyone's going to understand you. Some people are going to label you. Some are going to question your choices, whisper behind your back, or try to fix you with unsolicited advice. But the truth is, once a woman knows who she is and what brings her peace, she stops needing the world to clap for it. And the women who've chosen to live alone, not just in a house or apartment, but fully and intentionally with themselves, they've learned how to tune out that noise. Not because it doesn't sting sometimes, but because they've built something stronger underneath it. They've found out what it means to belong to themselves. And when you belong to yourself, you don't shift for approval. You don't water yourself down to make others comfortable. You live, you breathe, you walk into your space and know it was made for you, by you. Some people may never understand that kind of contentment. They'll keep projecting their fears onto it. They'll keep suggesting that your life must be temporary, that it's just a phase until the right person comes along. But the women I'm talking about, they're not waiting. They're not living in a holding pattern. They're not treating their lives like a blank page that someone else is supposed to write on. They're writing it themselves, fully, boldly, without apology. And listen, that doesn't mean they've shut the door on love. It doesn't mean they don't want connection, but they've learned not to chase it at the cost of their own stability. They know that any relationship worth having has to, the life they've already built, not erase it. That kind of self-assurance, that kind of calm, it's magnetic and it's often misunderstood. But here's the beauty of it. They don't need to be understood, not by everyone, not anymore, because they've outgrown the need to prove their happiness. They've outgrown the chase for validation. They've made peace with themselves. And in doing so,